Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. I am your host, Roberta Ndlela. If you are looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, this is the podcast you should be tuning into. Communication and soft skills are crucial for your career growth and leadership development. And by the end of this episode, please log on to Apple and Spotify and leave us a rating and a review. Now let's get communicating with our guest today, joining us from Idaho. Jim Tracy is a Grampion, a CEO of over 30 years, fellow podcaster, and best-selling author. He's also a jet pilot. He speaks on workplace culture and will help us today to deal with uncertainty. And before I go any further, please help me welcome him to the show. Hi, Jim.
Wow, thank you so much. What an honor to be here, Roberta. Thank you.
And I'm honored that you've joined us. Thank you so much. Welcome to the show. Now, they call you the curator of culture. How did that come about?
I was working with a client and they actually came up with that name on their own and then they told it to me and I was a bit offended because I thought uh, a curator, that sounds like an old museum guy. And they said, exactly. That's the person. Curator comes from the Latin root word to care for. And if you care for a culture, you then become the curator of culture. And I said, I kind of like that now. So it actually came from a client, and I was helping them to try to revive their culture.
Mm. I'm glad that you communicated to the client your concern about the term, and it turns out that you misunderstood because that's always what we highlight, that a lot of the time misunderstandings come from Jim says something to me. Instead of asking him to explain, I
Mm,
make my own assumptions, and then there's tension or we fight and there's conflict.
yeah. What I heard is this. Did you really mean that? And then people get to open up and be direct with one another. It solves a lot of problems.
It always does, for sure. So,
Yeah.
when it comes to culture, first of all, how would you describe what workplace culture is?
There's a friend of mine, his name is Clint Pulver, and he wrote a book called I Love It Here. And so when you have people who you work with, and I don't have any of it works for me, I only work with people. If you have people that you work with, if they want to come to work and they derive satisfaction from the actual performance of their duties that they're actually doing for their family, if they derive satisfaction from that because you empower them to do that, that's what I look at. When I go visit businesses, people often hire me to come and say, "Hey, help our management team." And so I go in, but I don't ever go in the front door. I don't ever take the elevator up to the ivory tower. I go to the loading dock. I go to the manufacturing floor. I go to the shop where at that point you get to actually talk to the people who make the money, who do the work, and that'll tell you a lot more about a business than sitting with some CEO in a Brooks Brothers suit.
Hmm. You remind me of a previous guest who shared a story of actually the opposite of that. So one of the CEOs that they had they had worked with, the company, but when they heard that the CEO actually parks far away from where everybody parks because he doesn't want to interact with anyone, he uses the back elevator so that he doesn't have to say hello. He
Oh
actually
my.
avoids talking to people.
Wow. One of the things I found out, people ask me, when we went over 100 employees, it was very difficult to continue to touch and impact people's lives. And so when we were about 50 employees, I started doing what I called the most important task of my month. And the most important task of my month was handwriting a birthday card to every employee and then mailing it to their home. And I had people who came to me, and when you get 150 and then 200, that becomes a lot of cards. So someone help me address them and some, but I always found something that I could say that was encouraging about that person or about the job that they did or about the crew that they were on or the customer satisfaction that they created by something that they did. You can always find something positive to say to someone. And when the leader takes time to put it in writing, and I mean with one of these, when you put it in writing with a pen and you write that and you write their name individually and you sign your name individually, I've had men come to me after and I mean people that are a little bit longer in the tooth, and they
Mm-hmm.
come to me and sometimes they've even wept because it meant so much that the big boss got them a birthday card. That was my most important job. That's what retained the family feeling in a business that had outgrown the family.
Hmm. Because first of all, they are seen, and you show that the work that they do matters.
Mm.
Because that's all I need. So the ones that you spoke to that were satisfied, what is it? Did they actually specifically mention some of the things that made them feel that way about their workplace?
It depends. If you're talking about my company, I was very, very engaged on a daily basis with the people who actually did the work, and I, I, I put off the stuff that I was supposed to do sometimes. I found somebody else to do the administrative stuff so I could stay with the people because in a service industry, the people are what build the business. All I did was like put the chess pieces in the right place so they could play the game. And so when I spent time with them, that became my most important task. What I find is that when other companies that I consult with are chasing growth, that they forget about the engine that creates growth. And the engine
Mm.
that creates growth is the people who actually do the work. And sometimes it could be out in the field, sometimes it could be at a manufacturing floor. I've got another one that an agricultural customer where, you know what? The cows don't take care of themselves.
They have a shepherd for sure.
They do. And you know what? He needs to feel like he's important to the organization. And so, regardless of what you do, there's somebody actually doing the work. And we as leaders need to be very cognizant that we don't get paid if they don't do their job.
That's very true. As you said, they are the engine that creates the growth.
Oh,
And
yes.
when you work with leaders and organizations who come to you and they say, Jim, this is our challenge. What is
Yeah.
it that they usually say is the challenge when it comes to leading people?
One of the things that I have done is crafted something called the Culture Revival Blueprint. And people say, why do you call it a blueprint? Well, if you're going to build something, you have to have a design and you
Mhm.
have to have a foundation that holds up the rest of the thing, whatever it is, a house, a building, whatever. And so I created the Culture Revival Blueprint, which is it's a blueprint that takes you back. You take a step back and say, what is the business that I wanted to build? And does it feel like that today? Does it feel like that to the people who work here? And so often I come across entrepreneurs who say, you know what? I really don't like where our business has gone. And sometimes we have to take a step back and say, where did you want to, what did you want it to feel like for people who worked here when you began the business? And so we begin the process of rebuilding a mindset that rebuilds a framework, that rebuilds a culture, that revives the people who are actually doing the work. And it can only be empowered at the leader level. Because if the leader doesn't care, everybody knows. If the leader cares, everybody knows. And if they don't, we need to show them how to care. And if they do, we need to show them how to express that care to the people who, like you said, are the engine of growth and process and everything good that our customers experience comes from the hands of our people.
That is very true. Now, the clients that are leaders, do any of them come to you and they say, Jim, I thought the promotion was going to be great, But the first thing I noticed was, I don't want to deal with people. I had a previous guest
Yeah. I
who said,
recently met with a guy.
right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I recently met with a guy and he was at the head of an organization and I said, how are you doing? How, how is your life right now? And he goes, my life is good, but I hate my job.
Oh
Like,
no.
okay. So, but that's always fixable. So he's the
Mm.
leader of the entire organization. And I said, so tell me, what do you hate about your job? Well, I just don't like the administration. I'm like, okay. So let's break that down. What are three things that you don't like to do?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, this, and this. And they were all administrative in nature. I said, so do you think that there's anybody in your organization who could do the first one? Like the one you hate the most? And he's just like, I don't know. Well, let me tell you, there is, because if you're doing a terrible job at it, I can find somebody who to do it. I mean,
Right.
I can find a clerk that would do that and then maybe hand it off for your review, but I can find somebody to do that job. And number two, the same thing. And number three, the same thing. So if you're a leader and you hate your job, everybody knows it. So let's fix that.
Yeah.
And the way we fix that is I always talk about when we were growing our business. I was really worried. I needed to bid every project. I needed to stay involved and engaged. And so when I created those bids to do telecommunications infrastructure, I made sure that we made the margin. I made sure I was in control. And guess what? I was the bottleneck. And then I figured out that when I handed it off and produced it, I was like going, you know what? That guy's doing a nice job on those bids. As a matter of fact, we're actually picking up a couple points of margin when he bids it. He's doing a better job than I did. And then the bids got bigger. And pretty soon I was saying, if it's not over $1 million, you guys just handle that. And then I was off doing what I was supposed to do instead of what I didn't want to do anyway. And they did a better job at it. It
But
was
you had
wonderful.
to discover that they would do a better job because I think a lot of leaders also, when they get promoted, they think, are they going to be able to do it as well as I would? Because you usually get promoted because you're very good at your technical skills, right?
Correct,
And so it's
correct.
very hard to trust handing it over, delegating it to your team and say, are you going to be as good as I was when I was doing this in your position?
Exactly. But most of the time, what I find is with leaders, they need someone who has a little outside influence and doesn't have what we'll call a dog in the fight. Um, it's not important to me that whether you do bids or not, Jim. I'm just telling you, you're the bottleneck. And from the outside looking in, it's a lot easier to see. And when you have a leader that's looking for help, then they're open to change and they're open to listening.
Hmm. Now
Yeah.
let's talk about, you call it management by cliche. What do you mean by that?
Okay. I I, uh, uh, I wrote my first book called Building Men, and the publisher came back to me and they said, "This is awesome. What's your next one?" And I'm like, I have no idea, but I'd been collecting a list of proverbs, business proverbs that had worked over time. And then we added ones as we built our own business. And so there's a book coming out hopefully in February if I can get my act together. There's a book coming out in February called Management by Cliche, and it's business proverbs that worked. And there's a lot of business proverbs out there. These are ones that have actually proven themselves in the marketplace over time. And we're so proud of this work. And the publisher has actually made the decision to make it a hardback now because it's it's an educational book. And so on one side of the page will be the proverb and then who said it, because most of them, like any good idea, they're stolen. And then on the right side will be the story about what I learned and where I learned it from with that proverb.
Mm-hmm. We're going to look forward to that. Management,
All
management
right.
by cliche, the
Yeah.
proverbs. Okay. When it comes to generational harmony,
Mm,
some of the things that we've addressed on the show are the communication aspect. We grew up, when we entered the workplace, it was very formal communication, writing, you know, you put the letter on the letterhead and it sounds very
yeah,
professional. But
yeah.
now you have a generation that grew up with texting language. It's a little more informal. And when they enter the workplace, you have the age of Jim and Roberta, but then you have
Uh-huh.
a Gen Z joining our team. And there's this huge communication gap. How do you handle that? And have you had clients who come to you and say, Jim, what are we going to do with these kids?
Yeah, exactly. And in all fairness, I have to look at a with a broader perspective. And in building men, I look at in that book, I looked at my grandfather. He was the first one I looked at, and he was born in 1903. So he was part of the greatest generation. And then there's my father, born in 1925, part of the silent generation. And there's me. I'm a baby boomer. My oldest son, Ryan, he is a millennial, and then you got Gen Y, and now you got all Gen Y and Z, and all the way now to Alpha. That's my grandkids. Well, I had two twin granddaughters born this year, so that's 2025, and my grandpa was born in 1903. That's 122 years of experience. I got along with all of them. And people say, well, yeah, but that's family. I'm like, well, let's dial that back a minute. If you talk to the people who were the greatest generation, do you know what they said about the silent generation? They said their music's bad, they dress funny, and I don't like the way that they're disrespectful. And then those people, the silent generation, what did they say about me?
Us.
The boomers, the hippies. They said they wear those bell-bottom jeans and they listen to that terrible rock and roll and they're lazy. And then what did the boomers say about the millennials? I can't stand that heavy metal music. I abhor the way they dress and they're so disrespectful. What are the millennials now saying about the next generation? They're saying that rap music and those kids don't know how to dress and they're so unbelievably lazy. And it's
I'm
gone.
sensing a theme, a pattern.
The kind of pattern has been set. So
Right.
what we have forgotten is people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And when they know that you care, I use my hand as an example. There's three fingers. The first biggest thing that we need to do, the biggest finger in the middle, is to listen. We generously listen with people. And then the ring finger is to remind me that we need to build a relationship. And
Mm.
we do that by gifting our time. And then the third one is about respect. And the question I always ask large crowds in particular from the stage is respect given or is respect earned? And half the crowd, usually the older half, is going to say, well, that's got to be earned. And the younger half usually says, well, it's got to be given. And my answer is yes. So if you give respect before it's earned or you earn respect before it's given, who wins? You do.
Mm-hmm.
You do. But also, they do.
Right.
Everybody wins. Everybody wins. If I give them respect and they do a great job, I can give them a pat on the back. If I give them the respect to do this task and they mess it up, I get to go coach them on how to do it right. See, if somebody who works for me makes a mistake, it's not on them, it's on me. I get an opportunity to say, there's a lesson, not an error. And I'm really happy because at the end of this, you're probably not going to make that mistake again.
Mm-hmm. That respect back and forth, I think, you know how if there's conflict and then there needs to be reconciliation, everybody wonders, is Jim gonna reach out to Roberta first or is Roberta gonna
Yeah.
reach out to Jim first? So is the respect earned or should I give it first and then they earn it? And there's always that who goes first. It's almost
Mm.
like a power struggle. if I go first and I reach out and, for reconciliation, or for giving respect, am I losing power in this dynamic?
Mm. Do you know what I find the two most difficult words in American business are?
Mm,
I'm sorry.
Most difficult.
Most difficult. I'm sorry. To admit your mistake, your error, your fault, your weakness in American business is to take your ego and tuck it away where it doesn't belong, in a pocket where people don't get to look at it. And you get to go, you know what? My bad. I really would like to make this better. Let's work together to make sure that we can make this something that's mended rather than something that's broken.
Hmm. Would you say that it's usually those in upper management or leadership who struggle with that, or just in general, everybody?
I'll tell you a story. There was a conference that I was at, and I was with a friend who was actually in the book Building Men, and I wrote about him because he's so fantastic. Here's one of the reasons why. We were standing at the back of the conference room, and there was a very arrogant man giving a speech. And he was talking about him and his company and his group and his process and his illustrious career and why he was so much better than everybody else. And we saw these two little old men at the table in front of us. And one of these little old men, they scribbled a note and he slid it over to the other one. And the other one looked at it and he nodded his head to his friend. And then he folded the note and put it back on the table. And John said to me, he said, I'm going to find out what that note says. We got something to learn. So we waited until the room cleared out and we went and we looked at the note. And there were three words on it. Ego blocks wisdom.
Ooh.
Hmm. Ego blocks wisdom. And from the opinion of the people who were listening, both me and my friend and the two men at the table, it certainly was blocking wisdom, wasn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah. And so that can come from anywhere. It can come from any level of leadership, but it's something that needs to be when you're think you're so important that you edge others out, you're really in a bad place. You're really in a bad
And
place.
what's
And
there to
as
learn? Because, like you said, it blocks wisdom. If your
mm,
ego is telling you that you've got it made, you know everything, obviously not going to learn anything new.
yeah. And information is certainly important, but it's different than wisdom.
Mm.
Wisdom is simply the application of knowledge. So we take in information to give us knowledge, but then in order to actually make it useful, we have to apply it in real life. And if we apply it in real life and no one listens, it's useless. But if we
Mm.
apply it in real life in a way that people can take it in and use it and utilize it, it's a wonderful thing. It's called mentorship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Like
You
we were
know,
saying
in
earlier. So go ahead.
yeah, in the culture today, I think if you look back at that silent generation to the greatest generation, they mentored one another. And then to much the same way, my generation, we still had apprenticeships in the boomers and we
Yeah.
still had ways to learn and there were processes that we could use that were predictable to get ahead. And then the generation behind us was the first group of children who didn't have anybody at home. They called them latchkey kids. So when they got home from school, there was no one there. They were kind of on their own. And then to fill that void, then we introduced electronics, and now we've got another generation coming up, especially in the Gen Zs. They have never known life without a supercomputer in their hand. They have all the information. We can't add any information to what they already have. But
Mm-mm.
what we can do is teach them how to apply the information. That's what they're lacking, and that's what mentorship is all about.
And that's where the wisdom will come from.
Yes.
Hmm.
And especially if you have a repeated application of knowledge that's successful, Then you're stacking, you're going good on top of good on top of good. And then you learn that there's reward for that.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely there can be generational harmony as you just described that
Hmm.
you can get along with everybody. And it
You
seems as
have to.
though it seems as though each generation judges the next, most of it baseless, I would say. I think it's
Hmm.
more as humans, we have this comfort zone of I want things to remain the same. And so
Yeah.
when the next generation starts to do things differently, that's when we start with all the criticism you just mentioned earlier.
And how fair would it be if I went to someone in the generation older to me and I started doing a stomp because they didn't know how to use this computer that I know how to use? It would be like one of my children or my grandkids handing me an Apple phone. I don't have an Apple. I have an Android, and I don't know how to use an Apple. But they can't really get mad at me because I don't know how to Apple. But they can teach me. They
Yes.
can show me. They can help me. And I can do the same with them. There's some things that I know, like Gen Zs is the second generation that doesn't really have the skill set of reading a tape measure.
Isn't that done
They
in
say, oh,
school?
that's seven and five little lines. Was that 5/16 or is that 5/8? They don't know. They've never been taught. They never really grabbed a hold of fractions because they all had calculators. So our generation has to teach them in the construction business to use a tape measure. Should we do that harshly or should we do that gently?
I just assumed that, math teachers still do that in school despite the calculators and the iPads and
Nope.
everything. Okay.
Nope. Yeah, they understand the decimal part of it, but they don't really understand the fraction part of it. And you can't build a
Interesting.
house without understanding a tape measure. Otherwise, it's going to end up pretty crooked.
Oh no. And no architect will be able to take those measurements and do something with that.
There you go.
Right. Now, the last thing I wanted us to just find out quickly from you is you say that uncertainty can be our friend. And I don't know if you've heard of the VUCA concept: volatile, uncertain, complex, and this ambiguous environment that leaders especially find themselves in. How can we make uncertainty our friend?
Well, I have a speech that I give that's called Embrace Uncertainty. And it was really a favor to me because I was going to do a speech for a group and they said, "Hey, Jim, you're a great speaker. We want you to come and talk to our group. And there's going to be 700 of us in a room. And what speech do you want to give us?" And I said, "Well, I think, I do a terrific one that would, most of the people in your room are leaders, that I should talk about leadership." And they're like, "No, we don't want you to talk about that." And I said, "Why?" I like, but I'll give myself a little pat on the back. I decided to listen instead of talk. And I said, "What would you like me to speak about? What are your concerns? What are the pain points that you're finding in your industry?" And they said, "Well, there's uh, interest rates and there's inventories and there's layoffs and there's this." And they listed about seven different things. And I said, "It sounds like a pretty uncertain environment." And that's it.
Hmm.
So I crafted a speech to embrace uncertainty. And and here's the premise of it. Are you worried about interest rates going up or going down?
Going up, because then it's going to cost more, especially if you have a mortgage in this country. It's going to cost
Yeah, but what
more.
if you're a banker? What if you're a banker and the rates go down, then you don't make as much? See, here's the
It
point.
depends where you
If
are.
you're worried about interest rates going up or down, you're right. They will. They're going to change. And so if you prepare for change in going up or going down, then are you ahead of the competition who's going to sit there and fret about it? Or are you planning in advance? And now uncertainty becomes an advantage, an obvious advantage for you over your competition. What about raw material prices? Are they going to go up or down?
They usually go up.
Yep. Yep, that one way or the other, they're going to go up or
They're
they're
going
going
to
to go
go up.
down.
Mm,
What about customers who want, do they want lower price or higher price? Well, they usually want lower price, then we have to
mhm.
pass it along. But you know that. So if you're trimming and you're looking for ways to become more efficient and scale your business before you need it, are you going to have an advantage over your competition?
Of
Of course you are.
course.
Okay. And what about COVID? What if there's another COVID headed our way? Um, should we be worried about that? No, we should prepare for it. How do you prepare for it? You think about it. You create contingency plans. You talk to your people about it. People are going to bring you great ideas. And what if our only supplier says, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to get out of this business. Well, what do? We prepare to replace them either by vertical integration and doing it ourselves
Mhm.
or by finding another supplier and saying, hey, let's share the wealth.
Mm,
All of the things in life are tremendously uncertain. And if we do an adequate job of preparing and embracing uncertainty, if we're afraid of it, then we tend to shut it out and ignore it.
but it's
That's
not
not
going
an
to go
appropriate
away.
response. It's never going to go away. So the only thing that we should be embracing is change.
Hmm.
And change is uncertain, and people don't like uncertainty. But when they learn to embrace uncertainty, guess what happens? They win.
They have the advantage, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like uncertain. Yes, we know changes for sure, which means uncertainty. We know it's no. I have no guarantees here except for death and taxes. But anything else
Yeah.
is not guaranteed, as Phyllis say. So if I know
Yeah.
anything else is not guaranteed, that means I should just constantly be planning and making those contingency plans.
Hmm. And watching ahead, many times um, when we think we can't see things in advance, actually, there's a lot of tells out there that show us what's coming. And it doesn't matter whether it's an industry. I was part of an industry where they put together this, it was an original equipment manufacturer supplier, and they put together this product and it was like super wonderful at first. But then we realized that as time went on and as vibration happened, it wasn't so great. And so we realized this before the customer realized it. And
Mm-hmm.
and one of the guys in my book, Building Men, said, hey, we have to come up with a way to solve that problem before the customer figures out there's a problem.
Oh,
And he
that's a good
did.
one. So be ahead of it. Yes.
Yeah. And so what he did was he went on his own money and he got a sample product for them to test in case this problem that he knew was coming would
Mm-hmm.
ever present it to them. And they were like, wow, that's awesome. And they wrote him a purchase order on the spot.
Of course. I would also
Yeah.
want my supplier to be solution driven to even see the
Yeah.
problem before
Yeah.
I notice it. Yes. Any
Because a
last
lot
words
of
of wisdom?
problems
Go ahead.
are unforeseeable,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not unforeseeable does not mean you don't know they're coming. It means you can't see them where they are, but they're still
Right.
coming. And the closer that they get to you, you have to recognize them as far away as you can and then respond to them and make it a game.
A game?
Yeah, have your staff come up with something that can improve a product, that can improve a process, that can improve your performance, and all of that is gonna be able to address the change that's coming. And all of a sudden, they're looking down the road, and you're not the only one responsible for it.
Right. That's where the wisdom is, the collaboration,
Yeah,
and as a leader, just knowing that you don't have all the answers. That's why you have a team.
yeah, exactly.
Yes. Any last words of wisdom? Anything that I haven't asked you today you were hoping to share with us?
Wow, I have a wonderful podcast called the Grampion, and I have some guests on there. I have a guy was on today with me, and he
Hmm.
talks about cybersecurity, and I learned so much from him
Wow.
that I think that the new information medium that you, Roberta, are proffering is helping people. So I want to say thank you to you because you helped me learn just like he helped me learn today. And I encourage your audience to subscribe and like.
Yes, the Grampion podcast hosted by Jim Tracy. Thank you so much, Jim. And then your book, Building Men. Do you think that any of our female listeners would think, why were we excluded from Jim's book?
Um, you know, that is the first response I got, but I'm going to tell you, if you open here's the book Building Men, and if you open
Right.
it to the front, to the very front,
Mm-hmm.
there's an acknowledgement in here. And the first thing that I wrote, the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world.
Mm-hmm.
William Ross Wallace, 1865. This book is dedicated to the women who shaped my life into something better than I deserve. And I talked
Thank
about my
you.
wife and my daughters and my granddaughters. And this
Uh-huh.
book, the first bestseller I got on Amazon with this book was with single parents.
Wow.
So the moms out there are crushing it, and hopefully I can do a little bit with Building Men to encourage them and help them.
Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jim Tracy, the CEO, podcaster, bestselling author, and the Grampion podcast host. We appreciate you being here today. And before you go, where can our listeners find you online?
The best place is thejimtracy.com, T-H-E, thejimtracy.com. There's more than one of us, unfortunately.
Of
So
course.
if they go to that, there's where they can find me, and it's easy to contact me.
Okay, thejimtracy.com. I'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Jim, for being here today.
Roberta, I am so grateful for your time and for the time your audience invests in you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Jim. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify, and stay tuned for more episodes to come.